If I say the name Harry Carey, who recognizes that name? Harry Carey. Oh, yes. If you're a Cubs fan, you absolutely know that name, don't you? He may not have been the best song leader, but he was probably the most famous voice of the Chicago Cubs sportscaster. He died just before spring training in 1998. And his trademark was his lead into the seventh inning. And he would say, "Let me hear you." And he'd bellow, "A 1, a 2, a 3. Then everyone would sing, "Take me out to the ball game." A lot better than I can. And he wasn't slick, and he often mispronounced names, but he was definitely a personality. He was every man's man, and his beliefs about God seemed to be every man's belief. In his book, Holy Cow, he shares these words, surprisingly. He says, "I'm not a religious man. I've made some mistakes in my life. Dutch is my third wife, and I paid a lot of alimony in my time. But I've always believed in Almighty God, and I've always believed," that typo, "that if you live your life as a decent person, the umpire in the end will say that you did right." All right, let's. He sort of reflects the four primary beliefs of what seems to be on the street today, every man, every woman's belief. All right, if I just sort of admit my mistakes, all right, just sort of lay them out there, okay, and I believe in an Almighty God, and if by my self-definition, if I have been a decent person, a nice person, a good person, then in the end, the umpire will call you safe. But let's stop and think about this way of thinking, these kinds of beliefs. Because in the end, God basically, it says God's going to do what God's going to do. And if you just live a decent life and be a good person, it's going to be okay. But in our passage today, Jesus says maybe that's not quite correct. Maybe we need to look at this a little bit differently. And he challenges these beliefs. And Harry Carey, like many people in our day and age, live like what we might call an unexamined life. And Jesus says there's a danger in living lives that are unexamined. And so today, in our passage, we're going to find that Jesus points out sort of the foolishness of a carefree life. So this morning, we're going to talk about who will I be today, self-examination. And Jesus delivering his Sermon on the Mount, the greatest message preached by the greatest minister that has ever delivered a message to how to be Jesus in this world. And he says to us, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." All right. I want to illustrate as best I can how ridiculous this whole thing is that Jesus is laying out this scene. All right. I am this guy. All right. I am that guy with this big plank in my eye. I am the guy with the plank in my eye. Okay, here we go. Here's the plank. I'm that guy. And somehow I miraculously see my friend has a little teeny tiny piece of sawdust in his eye. And so I make up my mind to do the best I can to take out this little piece of sawdust in his eye. Now, how many of you have had to take a piece of sawdust, a speck, or help someone else clear their eye out? Or someone else help you clear your eye? What do? You get in really close to them, don't you? You take their eyelids and you open their eye really wide as best you can, and then you lean into them and look deeply into their eye to try to find this little speck of sawdust or dirt that they might have in their eye, and hopefully, maybe with a little water, you can flush it out. All right, now if I've got this plank in my eye and I'm going to try to take the speck out of my friend's eye, guess what I'm going to do to him? I'm going to knock him unconscious. I'm going to knock him out, give him a concussion. It just can't be done. It's ridiculous. And in any case, we wouldn't be able to get the speck out. And we all know all kinds of different people with all kinds of different planks in their eyes. And our planks come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. And our planks represent our shortcomings, our faults, our failures, our brokenness, sin. Where we're not the person that we want to become. And some of us have the plank of anger, or the plank of greed, or impatience, or pride, or laziness, or callousness, or self-centeredness, or envy, just all kinds of planks for all kinds of different people. And I want you to know, when my guard is down, and I'm not thinking about who I am and who Jesus has created me to be, my planks come out huge. Like my plank of driving aggressively, my plank of impatience, and I hate to admit it, my plank of being judgmental, my plank of being blunt, my plank of a knee-jerk reaction. I've got all these different planks in my life. These are my planks. I've got them, but guess what? You've got some planks too, don't you? So the question becomes, well, how do we get our planks? How does this come about? Well, the bottom line, we'd inherit them from their parents, who had inherited from their parents, who inherited it from their parents, and their parents, and their parents, and their parents. And the Bible says it goes all the way back to the beginning. For Paul, the disciple of Jesus, writes in the book of Romans, for all have sinned all the way down through history and fallen short of the glory of God. Notice the word all. All have sinned. And then it comes back. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men, because what? All sin. We are born into this world not with a silver spoon, but with a speck in our eye. It's called our sin nature. And as we grow, our sin nature grows with us. It's shaped by the life, the things that have happened to us in life, and the things that we've done and have been done to us. At home, at school, in society. You know, maybe growing up, you're a child, and your parents got divorced. And you were denied the happy home that you thought you deserved. And the loving parents both therefore that you wanted them there for you. And as you grew, your anger grew the speck in your eye. Or maybe you were abused, laughed at, or ridiculed, or told that you're no good. You'll never amount to anything. And your resentment caused your speck to increase. Or maybe you were around people who they always wanted more and more and more and more in life, and you want to be like them, so your speck grew out of greed. Until that day, it became like a full-blown plank in your eye. And all this happened just a day at a time. A day at a time when you were judging the specks in other people's lives instead of doing self-examination on your own life. A day at a time of not taking time to look at yourself and bend the knee before God in prayer, instead get caught up in the busyness of life. A day at a time if you fail to examine your motives, why you do what you do. What is it that God would have for you? One day at a time until your sin-nurtured speck becomes a sin-filled plank, because we never took time to examine our life. That's how we get our planks. And maybe the most sobering thing about our planks is that even though we may not be able to see them, everyone else can. You know, in an unexamined life, our planks, no matter their shape or their size, all do the same thing. They blind us to ourselves. We may try to overlook them or pretend they're not there, but they're there. And try to hide them or deny them, they are in plain sight for others to see. You don't think so? You don't think so? Ask your spouse. Ask your spouse. Ask your friends. Ask God. If you have planks, if you have planks in your eyes. And since we all have planks, and since God can see them, in pretty strong terms, Jesus tells us how to deal with them. He says, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. In other words, before you even dare to look at and try to help another person with the brokenness sin in your life, you'd better look at your life first and deal with it first the way it needs to be dealt with, and through self-examination. And this is what it sort of looks like in real time as Jesus shares a story. He says, to some who are confident of their own righteousness and look down on everybody else, Jesus told this parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. And the Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, robbers and evildoers and adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. On that day, both the Pharisee and tax collector took their planks to the temple. But only the tax collector left his plank there. he left his plank at that temple. And in worship, you can leave your plank here in this temple. You know, and it doesn't have to just be in worship. It can be during your times of prayer as you're seeking God, self-examination. You can leave your planks with God. Or it can happen as you're still before God when you're alone. Or when you read the Bible or your daily bread or your devotional. Or when you're walking out in nature and you're listening for the voice of God, you can do self-examination. Or at the Eden Center in Bible study. Or sit in the park outside of Eden, you can perform self-examination. And whenever and wherever it happens, to be the man or the woman we've been created to be, we have to examine our lives. And as we do, ask Jesus to take our planks. Say that with me. Jesus, take our planks. I do not have it in me the ability to do that. And neither do you. We need Jesus' help. And now we're going to take some time in communion to remember the God-man who came to take our planks by giving his life for us.